Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of It's Not Supposed to Be This Way online Bible study.
That's right.
Okay, Lisa, I've heard it from so many people. You can't put your book down, can you? In fact, we talked about it in week 1, I think, going through quickly.
Right.
And people just cannot put it down.
Wow.
You have us riveted. So we're so excited. But this week, even if you've passed it, back up. Go back to chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 4 is called Tan Feet.
Yes.
Right?
Intriguing.
Yes. Chapter 5, Paintings and People. And you know, in both of these chapters, you kind of talk about fear. And that's kind of like the overriding theme here. And, you know, so I expect when I talk about fear and overcoming a fear, what are some things you might talk about? Okay, I'm going to overcome my fear of this, and I'm going to jump out of an airplane, or I'm going to go on some really deep spiritual journey to get past whatever. But you did something that kind of caught me off guard, and I thought, okay, first of all, I don't ever want to do this, but I kind of was like, this is funny, this is serious, this is funny again. So tell us about something that you did to take a step in getting past some fear.
Well, both of these chapters are very daily. Walking through this, I remember I would dread going to bed at night because I had lived in a house full of people for 25 years, you know. We had 5 kids and we'd been married for a very long time, so I wasn't used to being alone.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, all of my kids grew up and now they're out of the house, and then my husband isn't there. And so I was utterly alone. So I was experiencing fear, extreme fear, especially at night.
Right.
And then I would wake up in the morning, and I was just overwhelmed with anxiety. And I think fear and anxiety really hold hands.
Absolutely.
I think they're cut from the same cloth, if you will. I needed not a big spiritual epic, like do this and solve fear for all time. I needed to show myself that I could conquer fear today. And so I remember I was doing my quiet time, and I was really frustrated. God, why am I dealing with fear and anxiety so much? Why am I've always been a person that was so excited about life, and now I'm just dreading the next moment and the next because it's all so painful.
Right.
And this idea popped in my head, conquer a small fear today. And I don't want to say it was from the Lord, but I really did feel like that was a direction from the Lord. So I thought, well, how do I conquer a small fear today? You know, so I got in my car and I drove to Target because that was the closest place to my house where I could go and buy, wait for it, a 2-piece bathing suit. So you read about that this week, I'm sure. And like I said in the book, I want to assure you that I realize a 2-piece bathing suit does not line up with my biology. It probably doesn't even line up with my theology. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I'm not being a proponent of buying 2-piece bathing suits at Target. That's not what's happening here. It was just a very practical way for me to tackle something that was paralyzing me. So I remember going to the 2-piece bathing suit section and thinking, this is ridiculous. It's nothing but triangles and strings, top and bottom, right? And it's been a while since I even ventured into that section of any store, let's be honest. But I bought it, and I put it on the conveyor belt I picked it up and then put it on the conveyor belt and bought it and got in my car. And as I was driving home, I made myself pop the tags off because then I couldn't
change your mind.
Change my mind.
Very smart.
And I got home, and putting it on wasn't what was so difficult. What really was the angst of the situation was me turning toward the mirror. And I started hearing all these voices that were reminding me that I would hate what I would see. I would hate seeing myself naked, and I would feel lots of shame. And I make a big deal about in the book that Adam and Eve could stand before God naked and unashamed because they had no other opinion to contend with but the absolute love of God himself. That was not my situation. And I realized I was hearing all of these voices. I was even hearing my own commentary. You know, I have a big scar that runs down my entire middle, and it's like an exclamation point on the trauma that I've been through physically and emotionally. And plus, you know, I'm just not as young as I used to be, and I like to eat healthy and work out, but the clock is just working against me here. You know what I'm saying? And so I was hearing all these voices of all these opinions of different people, and my own dialogue mixed in. And I had to let God one by one, every time something popped in my mind, like, you know, you've always had big legs. Okay, so let God unpack that, you know, let God address that. And I asked God every single statement that popped in my mind that was against me. I asked God, you speak over that in my heart. You untangle that. You pull the anxiety and the fear out of that statement. And what I realized as all those statements were popping in my mind, and I was just bringing them and laying them before God one by one by one, I realized what gives power to my fear is not necessarily something outside of me. It's inside of me. When I give that fear credibility, when I allow that fear access to the deepest part of my heart, when I allow a thought into my head that I haven't checked first against the truth of God. And I let God address all of those. And then there was a moment where I finally turned and faced myself in the mirror, and I wrote in the book, and I didn't die. I didn't die, you know? And I just thought, this is such a silly thing, but with such a profound truth. And then I almost felt so empowered. I was like, well, I'm just going to walk outside in my two-piece bathing suit. And then that's when Jesus did take the wheel and just reminded me some experiences should just be between me and him, right?
Well, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing such a powerful realization in such a simple but hard act of putting on a two-piece bathing suit. So thank you for that. All right, everyone, we have our Life Upside Down segment with Melissa and Lisa. And so let's go see what Lisa has to say this week.
Lisa, in the chapter Tan Feet, you talk about how you decided to slow down and how because suffering also requires a slower pace. And so you might decide you need to slow down, but the world doesn't always cooperate with you. So how do you slow down when there's family demands, there's work demands, there's things going on around you that don't slow down? What do you do to kind of bring yourself to that quiet place so that you can even get in a position where you can hear from God?
Well, I think this is a complicated question because depending on your circumstances, there may be certain realities in your life where you can't slow down. If you've got small kids at home, you can't just suddenly hit the pause button on all their activity and needs. And the reality is they want to eat 3 times a day, right? So, you know, that's that. If you have a job that's depending on you, it may not be an option for you to take a sabbatical or to hit the pause button on that. But here's what you can do. You can be honest with the people around you that you are in a season or a situation that is taking a lot of emotional energy, and you will do the very best you can do to meet the responsibilities that you have, but you don't have a lot of extra to give right now. And what extra you do have to give, you've got to make sure to take care of yourself emotionally and physically. You know, when we go through something devastating emotionally, it's complicated because we don't have outside indicators of brokenness. If it was something physical, if we had a broken arm, people would accept the reality that we would have limitations because our arm is broken. Or if we were walking through cancer, people would accept the realities that may diminish some of our energy and some of our ability to do everything at the pace that we once did it. When we have emotional brokenness, those outside indicators aren't as obvious. So we have to clearly communicate to the people who have expectations of us our diminished capacity. And we have to be honest with ourselves and honest with them about what we do and don't have to give. And it may be that you do need to reduce your hours at work. It may be that in this season, you do need to get someone to help with childcare. It may be that you have to be brave enough to ask friends for help. It may be that you're in a season where someone does need to pass around a list to friends and family and have people bring casseroles to you at night for dinner or whatever. But I think the secret is don't try to just handle it yourself. I get it because there may be certain dynamics about the emotional issues that you're facing that you don't want to tell everyone all the details. That's okay. You don't have to share all the details. You can just simply say, I'm going through something. And when I have enough perspective on it, I will share what it is. But right now, I just don't have what I used to have to give.
Right. That honesty is key.
The
Being honest
honesty
with
is
those around
key.
you.
And, honestly, I think setting our life up to be surrounded by people who will give us permission, not even permission, but who will give us the grace to sometimes walk through difficult things. We have to remember, though, that we set that kind of atmosphere in our friendships by giving other people space and grace when they need it.
Right. Absolutely. That's great. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Lisa. All right, everyone, let's focus on our verse of the week this week. It comes from chapter 5, Paintings and People, and it is this. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Revelation 12:11. And Lisa, when I read this verse, there are a lot of phrases that seem very big and overarching, and I don't necessarily understand it all. So I would love for you to unpack it a little bit for us.
Well, basically what this verse is reminding us in a global sense and in a situational sense, the enemy is a defeated foe. He does not hold victory. He doesn't hold victory in a global sense. In other words, we've read the end of the book and we know who wins, right? Jesus has brought the blood, and by his blood, forgiveness for sin and redemption was made possible. So the enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb. That is true for all of eternity. That is true in the global sense. It's also true in a situational sense. But what I want you to remember is the enemy, we're told, he's very crafty. And so he will come in different situations and make you forget about the victory that is yours. And the most powerful way for you to remember that victory is by the word of your testimony or by the word of someone else sharing their testimony. So we get to participate in defeating the enemy in situations and participating. Jesus has already brought the blood. We must bring the word of our testimony. In other words, I would imagine for some of you, maybe your situations are very much like mine. And as you have been reading my story, you were simultaneously heartbroken for what I was going through, but at the same time relieved that you weren't so alone. And even if your circumstances are different, there is some kind of relief and an infusion of hope when you see someone else facing a brutal situation in life, still standing, proclaiming that God's word is true, that his promises will be fulfilled, that everything you're questioning about this, while you may not get the answers, you will discover a greater good in the midst of it or at the end of it. And when someone else infuses that into us and we grab a hold of hope, the enemy has no place in that situation. The enemy wants to isolate us because if he can isolate us, he can influence us. And the enemy also wants us to keep our mouth shut because he knows when we open up our mouth and we push past the shame and the fear and the anxiety of what we're going through, when we set all of that aside because we know that the words of our testimony are so powerful, there's someone else who would drown in their own tears if we're not seeing a glimmer of hope in ours. And in that sense, we partner with that powerful reality that Jesus' blood has defeated the enemy, but we get to participate in this situation to push the enemy aside.
And we hope that on the blog and in our community is a space where you can do that, where you can share and where you can offer hope to other people as well. So we hope that you find that there. All right, everybody, week 3 is well on its way. If you need help knowing what's going on, go ahead and check out your Week at a Glance resource in today's blog post. And we're going to try to say the tagline all together.
Okay,
which
I
I'm
got
really
it.
excited about.
Yeah.
So you
Yes.
guys want to try it?
Yes.
Ready?
Yep, we got it.
All right, so we believe something around here. It's when you know the truth and live the truth, it changes everything. We'll see y'all later.